From the moment he stepped onto the screen, Wesley Snipes was a force of nature. He was an artist, a martial artist, a leading man with a cool confidence that was impossible to ignore. In the late 80s and 90s, he built a career that was the envy of Hollywood, blending hard-hitting action with a subtle, undeniable charisma. He went from being a promising young actor in films like New Jack City to a global superstar who redefined the superhero genre with Blade. For a time, it seemed like no one could touch him. He had talent, he had star power, and he had a franchise that was minting money. But then, as quickly as he had risen, it all began to unravel. The projects became fewer and further between, the headlines shifted from box office success to bizarre on-set behavior, and finally, his name became synonymous with a very public legal battle. This is the story of Wesley Snipes, the boy from the Bronx who conquered Hollywood, and the series of choices, controversies, and conflicts that led to his dramatic fall from grace. This is the story of his downfall and the long, difficult road to his return. In the late 80s and early 90s, Hollywood was a battleground of new ideas and new faces. But few burst onto the scene with the raw, kinetic energy of Wesley Snipes. Born in Orlando but raised on the tough streets of the South Bronx, Snipes didn't come from a family of actors. He came from a world where you had to be quick on your feet and even quicker with your mind. From a young age, he was a student of the performing arts, attending the famed Fiorello LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts, the same school that inspired the movie fame. It was here he honed his craft, not just as an actor, but as a dancer and martial artist. A triple threat in every sense of the word. After graduating from the State University of New York at Purchase, the grind began. He worked in commercials and on stage, but his big break came not in a movie, but in a music video. In 1987, director Martin Scorsese was looking for a fresh face to play the street-tough rival to Michael Jackson in the iconic video for Bad. He found him in Snipes. The role was small, but his presence was undeniable, and it put him on the radar of a director who would change his life, Spike Lee. Snipes' natural talent and magnetic intensity were exactly what Lee was looking for. He cast him in Mo Better Blues as a saxophonist and later in the interracial drama Jungle Fever. But it was his work as the ruthless kingpin Nino Brown in Mario Van Peebles' New Jack City that truly made him a household name. He was more than an actor. He was a force of nature, a new kind of leading man who could be both charismatic and terrifying. The industry and the world was ready to take notice. The film was a cultural earthquake, and Snipes was the epicenter. He wasn't just a star, he was a phenomenon. Critics praised his electrifying performance, and audiences flocked to see a new kind of leading man who had both street smarts and a formidable on-screen presence. Hollywood took notice and the roles started pouring in. He could do it all. In 1992, he teamed up with Woody Harrelson for the wildly successful comedy White Men Can't Jump, proving he had both dramatic depth and perfect comedic timing. He was a master of his craft, capable of shifting seamlessly between genres. He continued to build his legend with roles in films like Passenger 57, where he delivered the now iconic line,
"Charlie, you ever play roulette?"
On occasion.
Well, let me give you a word of advice.
Always bet on black.
He shared the screen with Sylvester Stallone in the sci-fi actioner Demolition Man, a role that further cemented his place as a top-tier action hero. By the mid-1990s, Wesley Snipes wasn't just an actor, he was a brand. He was a bankable star who could carry a film on his name alone. But it was a call from Marvel Comics that would change his career and his life forever. If New Jack City made Wesley Snipes a star, then Blade made him a legend. In 1998, a time when comic book movies were a joke, a gamble, or both, Snipes took on the role of the Daywalker, a half-vampire, half-human hybrid who hunts his own kind. What followed was a cultural reset. Blade wasn't a family-friendly adventure. It was a brutal, stylish, R-rated horror action film that tapped into the cool, dark energy of the underground. Snipes wasn't just playing a character, he was Blade. He was a producer on the film, shaping the fighting style, the look, and the very attitude of the character. His real-life martial arts mastery gave the action an authenticity and ferocity that no other superhero film had dared to attempt. The film was a massive success, shocking Hollywood and proving that comic book properties could be profitable, serious, and cool. It single-handedly paved the way for the wave of superhero movies that would follow, from X-Men to Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. Snipes had done more than just star in a movie, he had changed the game. The success of the first film led to a blockbuster trilogy, with Blade 2 and Blade, Trinity solidifying his status as a global action icon. But as the money and fame grew, so too did a new set of problems. Problems that would take the man who seemed untouchable and bring him crashing back to Earth. The very thing that made him a legend would also contribute to his downfall. The first two Blade films were a triumph, solidifying Wesley Snipes as an undeniable force. But when production began on Blade, Trinity in 2004, the set quickly descended into chaos. What was meant to be the glorious conclusion to a groundbreaking trilogy became, instead, a public spectacle of artistic clashes, personal grievances, and ultimately, a significant stain on Snipes' once unblemished professional reputation. Director David S. Goyer, who had written the previous Blade films, found himself at odds with his star from the very beginning. Stories began to leak, painting a picture of a set fraught with tension. Co-stars, most notably Patton Oswalt, who played Hedges, offered vivid, often humorous, but ultimately damning accounts of Snipes' behavior.
And Wesley Snipes was going crazy, and he wouldn't come out of his trailer, and you'd walk by his trailer, and this wall of pot stench would just be like, whoa, and kind of push you to the side. And then he would only answer to the name Blade. You couldn't call him.
He would only answer to Blade.
The Blade, yeah. And after a while, he resorted to just give. He would communicate with Post-its that he would give to the director, and each one he would sign Blade.
The tension escalated, culminating in an alleged incident where Snipes was reportedly angered by a minor costume choice involving a t-shirt and attempted to physically assault Goyer. Oswalt described Snipes' intense, method-acting approach, staying in character as Blade even off-camera, as morphing into something more erratic and confrontational. Ryan Reynolds, who joined the cast as Hannibal King, reportedly clashed with Snipes over their differing acting styles, with Reynolds' improvisational comedy often at odds with Snipes' more serious, intense demeanor. These stories, initially whispered within Hollywood, quickly went public, creating a narrative of a difficult, unpredictable actor. The man who had once been praised for his intense dedication was now being labeled as unprofessional and volatile. The set of Blade, Trinity, became a crucible, forging not just a film, but a new, troubling chapter in Wesley Snipes' career. In the years that followed, as the stories from the set of Blade, Trinity became Hollywood legend, Wesley Snipes largely remained silent. But when he finally spoke out, he offered a very different perspective on what went down. He didn't deny the tension, but he did reject the most sensational claims, particularly the allegation that he tried to assault director David S. Goyer. Snipes called the story overblown and said, "It never happened like that." Snipes argued that the friction was a result of creative differences and a pushback against what he saw as unfair expectations. He dismissed Patton Oswalt's now famous anecdotes as simply the words of a man looking for a good story. In his own words, Snipes said, "We had some disagreements, but that's not an unusual thing. The rest of the nonsense, that's Hollywood folklore." He offered a more complex explanation for his behavior, suggesting that his refusal to communicate with Goyer was a form of protest against a system he felt was trying to undermine him. Snipes felt the stories about his on-set behavior were part of a pattern of racial bias and an attempt by the industry to control him. He pointed to a deep-seated distrust of authority stemming from a lifetime of experiences, including a past incident with law enforcement. From his perspective, he wasn't a difficult diva. He was a disciplined artist fighting to protect his creative vision and his professional integrity. The public narrative of his downfall was being written without his side of the story, and to him, it was a tale of misrepresentation and a calculated effort to tarnish his reputation. Just as the dust from the Blade controversy began to settle, a far more serious storm was brewing for Wesley Snipes. In 2006, the U.S. government unsealed an indictment that shocked Hollywood and the nation. Wesley Snipes was charged with conspiracy to defraud the Internal Revenue Service and multiple counts of willful failure to file income tax returns. This wasn't just a simple mistake. The government alleged that Snipes had fallen prey to a radical tax protester scheme. He was accused of subscribing to the 861 argument, a fringe legal theory championed by anti-tax advocates Eddie Ray Kahn and Douglas Rosell. This theory claimed that domestic income earned by U.S. citizens was not legally taxable, and that the IRS was an illegitimate agency. Under this influence, Snipes allegedly sought millions in refunds for taxes he had already paid and failed to file returns for years. The legal battle that followed was protracted and highly publicized. Snipes maintained his innocence, arguing that he was merely following the advice of his financial consultants. He stood firm, refusing to settle, and took his case to trial, a decision that would ultimately prove costly. His defense team attempted to argue that he was simply misguided, not malicious, and that he genuinely believed he owed no taxes. However, the jury saw it differently. In 2008, Snipes was acquitted of the most serious felony charges of conspiracy and tax fraud. But the relief was short-lived. He was convicted on 3 misdemeanor counts of willfully failing to file income tax returns for the years 1999, 2000, and 2001. While not the most severe charges, the willful part was key, indicating that he intentionally ignored his legal obligations. He was sentenced to serve 3 years in federal prison. While he had been acquitted of the more severe felony charges, the misdemeanor convictions for willfully failing to file his tax returns carried a significant weight. He would ultimately serve approximately 28 months of his 3-year sentence, released in April of 2013. Upon his release from federal prison, he was not a completely free man. He was placed in home confinement, serving out the remainder of his sentence under the supervision of a community corrections office in New York. His full sentence, including the period of house arrest, was completed on July 19, 2013. The time in prison solidified the public narrative of his downfall. The once untouchable star was now a cautionary tale. He had lost millions of dollars, years of his life, and a significant amount of his public goodwill. After nearly 2.5 years in federal prison, Wesley Snipes emerged a changed man. In interviews following his release, Snipes spoke with a sense of calm and clarity. He reflected on his time in confinement not with bitterness, but with a surprising sense of philosophical detachment. He told one interviewer, "I hope I came out a better person." He spoke about the value of time and the importance of having his family and a solid support system around him, stating, "It puts you in a position where you really appreciate the little things." He also addressed his conviction, expressing that while he still believed the verdict was unjust, he had accepted his fate and learned from the experience. He explained that his time away gave him the opportunity to work on himself, to reevaluate his priorities, and to find a renewed sense of purpose. His return was aided by those who had stood by him. Friends and collaborators, like Sylvester Stallone, were instrumental in helping him get back on his feet. The road to redemption was just beginning, but for the first time in years, the path ahead looked clear. Stepping out of prison in 2013, the question lingered, could Wesley Snipes truly return to the Hollywood mainstream? Sylvester Stallone offered him a lifeline. Snipes' first major role post-incarceration was in The Expendables 3 in 2014, a fitting comeback given the film's premise of aging action heroes. In a stroke of meta-commentary, Snipes' character Dr. Death was himself freshly released from prison for tax evasion. It was a role that embraced his past struggles with a knowing wink, signaling to audiences that he was back and ready to move forward. But it was his performance in the 2019 Eddie Murphy vehicle Dolomite Is My Name that truly solidified his resurgence. Playing the flamboyant and exasperated director D'Urville Martin, Snipes delivered a comedic masterclass. He was effortlessly funny, stealing scenes with his perfectly timed reactions and over-the-top charm. The performance was a critical darling, earning him an NAACP Image Award nomination and reminding everyone of the incredible versatility that had defined his early career. It was a joyful, uninhibited return to form that showcased a renewed passion for his craft. He continued this successful collaboration with Eddie Murphy in the 2021 sequel Coming to America. Today, Wesley Snipes is a man who has not only survived the dramatic highs and lows of his career, but has found a second act. He continues to work in film and television. But his most powerful statement, and the true symbol of his redemption, came in 2024. After 2 decades, countless rumors, and a very public history with his co-star, Ryan Reynolds personally reached out to Snipes with an offer to return to the role that defined him.
You get a call from Ryan Reynolds out of the blue after 20 years, you go, okay, I gotta take this call. Let's see what this is about. It started with a text from Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, wow.
And I saw a text and it says, I want to talk to you. And I was like, I hate this guy. No, this is a joke. We've been playing this for like 2 decades. We've actually liked each other the whole time. But anyway, he called and told me, he said, I have this idea. And he told me what the idea was. And I was like, I don't know how the hell you're gonna pull that off. It was very unlikely. And I said, well, if you can make it happen, sure, I'll come and do it. And he was like, really? I was like, yeah, why not? Let's see what happens. I did not think it was possible.
In a moment that delighted fans worldwide, Wesley Snipes reprised his role as Blade in the Marvel Studios' film Deadpool and Wolverine. His appearance in the film was a metatextual victory lap. The reunion with Reynolds, a man he hadn't seen since their infamously difficult time on Blade, was a testament to his return to grace. Snipes, who once reportedly stayed in his trailer and used post-it notes to communicate, was now sharing the screen with his former co-star, a clear sign that old wounds had been healed.